Ready? Heads up, everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday yachting luncheon. It can't get prettier than out these windows. I was in New York last week for our Wednesday yachting luncheon, and I missed all of this, and it was a loss. Let's see a little bit about future speakers. You want to stop by during the Big Boat Series because Daniel Forrester, who shot the greatest yachts in the world for the last 30 years, will be here to talk all about the life of a yachting photographer. You wonder how it is he gets right under the giant asymmetric spinnakers and 100-foot masts without getting run over. He'll tell you he has been run over. You want to come by in mid-July and we'll listen to our own Chris Ray and his dear wife Kim Jones. They'll talk all about shooting elephants and incredible other fauna and flora in Africa. Getting under elephants and not getting run over. Shooting with a camera. You've been hearing about extreme sailing and foiling catamarans in the America's Cup. Guess what? There is a professional sailing circuit, extreme sailing circuit, and the skipper of and the head of the San Diego Extreme Sailing Adventure will be here. Dana Blackwood will be up as well. She's the general manager, so that'll be in the middle of July. And Matt Reynolds is a great competitive, world-class sailor, and he'll talk about making the transition from monohulls to foiling catamarans. In the end of the month, Jorge Lee, seated here today as a guest, will be to talk all about the Golden Gate Bridge. He's an architectural engineer. We keep looking at this beautiful golden creature for the last, more than half century, and Jorge can tell us how it stays as beautiful and as upright as we see it right now. And next week, you can't miss next week. We've started this tradition of having roasts way back in the Denny Jordan days. He was our first roastee in the 90s. We roasted him. And then we began again in the 2000s. Doug Holm was the second roastee. Since then, we've roasted Jimmy DeWitt and our dear friend in his past, Ed Bennett and Dewey Hines, and all manner of hilarious folks. Well, guess what? Our newest... Jimmy DeWitt, I said Jimmy DeWitt, and Ricky Pfaff, all manner of great fun folks, and we'll be roasting, and Grant Sotomayor will be roasting himself, Jim Casino. Say what you will about Jim Casino, but he doesn't talk down to people. So come and be ready. Be ready with your good humor and fun. We only, remember, great leaders can laugh at themselves, and to help them, we've invented these roasts. And of course, it's the most incredible, affectionate event, as we all know, because we all only tease our buddies. So come along, bring your material. The way it works is you say, I want to be on the lineup, and you're in like a batting order, and we show the batting order on the screen. And sometimes, even if you haven't announced beforehand that you want to be a roastee, you get inspired. So you're welcome to come along and be a roastee next week on the 20th of June for Jim Casino. Jim has not just been staff Commodore. He's not just a staff Commodore. He's also an auctioneer. So if you paid, several $100,000 more than you should have for a ride on a Cal 20 in front of the yacht club, you can come with your complaints. No warranties, of course. Anyway, Jimmy's a great fun friend and member of the club, so it's going to be fun to have him be the subject of our roast. A little bit about our speaker today. So one of the great fun aspects of chairing the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon now for 15 years is we get to meet people who have these incredibly fascinating lives. Sometimes they have lives beyond what you already knew. I knew our speaker from the sailing world. When he was a young 13-year-old, he had an El Toro. He banged around in those incredibly popular prams in San Francisco Bay for a while. And then he was crazy enough to get himself a Mercury. So, at age 15, he started racing Mercuries. I was racing Mercuries as a young kid too, so I can relate to it. There's almost nothing as slow as an El Toro unless you're looking at Mercuries, which means that you end up being a really good sailor because you've got to make this slug go through the water. And all kinds of things work. Going to the bow to get the stern out of the water looks crazy, and you need it because it's fast. Well, at the same time, he'd already been a car driver, because how many of us drove a car when they were 11? Julia, yes, here we go. A couple of other guilty parties have raised their hands. Bob Devlin, on private property, drove a Willys Jeep up in the Keysburg Ranch in Roseville, and it was legal because it was a private piece of property. And, that was incredible. He got to drive a car. I remember I drove a car the first time at 13. Anyway, he drove his car at 11, beating most of us. And then at age 13, he bought a car. He actually bought a Model T, a 1931 Model T Ford. Who wants to guess the price that our speaker today paid for a Model T Ford when he was 13? $7. Tim Ryan says $7. 24. 50 on the money. Right on the money. Roy gets it. That's 50. It was a Model A Ford. Model A Ford for $50. Bruce would have been right if he'd known it was a Model A. Otherwise, he would have an accurate guess. What color was it? Exactly the favorite color of all of them. Black. You get any color you want as long as it's black. At age 19, he forged his ID to make it look like he was 21 so that he could not buy beer, not buy booze, but join, as an underage member, the Sports Car Club of America. Bravo, I'm sorry to say, good on you, speaker. So he started racing sports cars underage and did so from 57 until 62. Hence, he knows all about the subject we're going to talk about today. He wasn't done with sailboats with a Triton. He wanted to buy another slow boat. So with a Mercury, he bought another slow boat. So he talked Lenny Delmas out of his Triton when he was 25 years of age. He bought Lenny Delmas's Triton. Those of us who remember those days, Lenny had a Triton, whose name was RYOT, our yacht. And after sailing for a couple of years, our speaker was able to not change the name, just change the pronunciation and call it Riot. He said that it best expressed how the crew and he did with each other. At any rate, he then bought a Canar in 1980. Those of you who sailed, they're slightly faster than Tritons and Mercuries and El Toros. They're called Canars. Anyway, they're beautiful boats, a great active and completely respected fleet in the Bay Area. He had one of those and he raced it until 2008 or so. And so I don't think we could offer a warmer venue for our great speaker today to talk all about when we had road races in Golden Gate Park. Come on up, Bob Devlin.
Well, good afternoon. This is quite a turnout.
I have a bigger responsibility. My faux pas, I have an even bigger responsibility than introducing the speaker.
Okay.
Admirable as he is, I want to introduce our Commodore. She's arrived in the room. Our Commodore, Teresa Brander, the first female Commodore in the history of the St. Francis Yacht Club. Way better than Bob for the moment.
Well, I thank you, Ron. I especially appreciate that you waited until I took an enormous bite of my salad to introduce me.
Timing is everything.
So, exactly. But, well, thank you, Ron, and welcome everybody here to the St. Francis, those of you members, guests, and also those of you viewing online. We love our online presence. We appreciate your interest. So thank you for tuning in. I actually started hearing about this presentation by Bob, and the only thing I could think of is racing cars on Marina Boulevard sounded like a lot of mischief, kind of wrapped in a nice fundraising package or some reason, some excuse to do it. But I love a good story, and I love mischief as well. So I'm looking forward to Bob's talk, and I want to welcome him as well. Thank you, Bob, for coming in.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. Two tough acts to follow. Okay. The piece that really promoted this thing was that all the racing off Marina Drive, Boulevard was not on the water. In 1915, with the Panama Pacific International Exposition, we had the U.S. Grand Prix, and a week later, the Vanderbilt Cup, both won by Dario Resta in a Peugeot, very advanced twin-cam Peugeot of that era. To fast forward, we're at Golden Gate Park in 1952 to 54 for 3 years. It's an amazing thing that happened. I'll take you through it now. It couldn't happen today. with all of the problems with insurance, et cetera. It just couldn't have happened. So let's bring up our first piece here. We have a few quick questions to ask you all. How many of you attended any of the races in Golden Gate Park? Wow. Yeah, I know Tim did. Yeah. So can you hear us all right back there? Yeah. So also, Ron did. I was a flagman my last year in '54 at Turn 4, and again, well underage, but I was there. How many attended all three races? For those of you that went, the programs are down here in front. You can look at them later, and also a book by Art Evans on the races, which are taken right from the program. How many of you actually raced on the 3.1-mile circuit? Anybody? I didn't either. So that was when we missed some. Okay. A lot of thanks go for photographers, and there's a big list there, including my own name, in terms of as a who's who of what the photographers were at the time. Here's how it got done. The Guardsmen. Anybody know what the Guardsmen is? Guardsmen is for underprivileged children, it's a campership drive. And they decided that besides for selling Christmas trees that they do down here on the lot every year, they decided to put on these races to raise money for underprivileged children. This is sort of how it conspired to be. Remember, you couldn't do this today. In Golden Gate Park, you could not close down the circuit and race cars through it. Here are the Guardsmen road race officials. Some of the names you may recognize up there, and going down the list. SCCA is the Sports Car Club American. Here are the officials. Here's on the right, on the upper right, is Bill Breeze. He used to have a shop right over where the float planes are in Sausalito. That was where his shop was. And over here, the next one is the race officials. The Mayor, Elmer Robinson, the mayor of San Francisco, pulled this off. I don't know how he did it at all. You recognize the name Walter Haas? You know, Levi Strauss and a background. He was president of the Guardsmen that year in '52. So between those two men, they were able to conjure up this thing. Pebble Beach had been run since 1950, so '52 was 3 years later, and so they ran these races. The big background on these things were Shell Oil, and they handled the tech inspection, et cetera. They laid out a course of 3.1 miles around the park. It's still there. You can still do it and run around it and look at it. Down where that one left-hand turn is going in, that's where I was the flagman. Everything else right-hand turns. Okay? Get it complicated a little more. The classes changed from 52 and 53 and 54. They went to numbered classes that year, and then afterwards they went to lettered classes. But basically it's broken out at 1,500 cc's, 90 cubic inches and below and above. So you have the big bore race of cars, larger bore, and the MGs and the smaller cars racing in the 1,500 cc class. Here's the program cover shot out here in the Presidio before the races. That's Sterling Edwards, who is the founder of the Pebble Beach Concours, in his Edwards Special in the lead. It's the same program cover they used every year. Over here on the left, you'll see is the original poster from 1952 for the Guardsmen advertising the race.
Grab that poster and give it to Bob.
Yeah, I'll come over later to it.
Let's get it right now while you're talking about it.
Yeah.
Put it up there in the camera.
All right.
Thank you.
Here it is on the camera. Okay.
Cool.
Everybody can see that? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now what we have here are the children, young children that are going to Campership Drive, lined up for rides around the racetrack by the drivers of their cars. On the left, you have a Simca, a couple of MGs, a TC, and 2 TDs lined up. This was very casual in the setting, but it attracted 10,000 people the first year in an audience. So safety was out the window. There was no such thing as safety. You see the rope stretched across in front? You see that rope going across? That's all that's keeping the spectators away from the race cars. And it's laughable when you think of it. There's not even hay bales there or snow fences or anything between the two of them. So it was very crazy about this is at turn 2, and it's a little grandstand bleacher rigged up there, a riser for people to sit in, okay? So here's what the start-finish line looked like with this This tarp going across back. Here's the beginning of the under 1,500cc races. A bunch of Simcas going off with Bill David. You ever know that name? The impresario Bill David from San Francisco. He brought all the big shows, New York shows out here, musicals, etc. Bill David's racing that car. So I'm not going to refer to my notes too much. I'm just going to go through things here, and you can see this next slide. You see 11th Avenue, Main Drive. In the background, here's an MG TD negotiating around the hay bales. But look at the position in the background of the escape roads of people lined up. If the car gets out of control, it would plunge right into them. It was very dangerous when you think about it in retrospect. Here are a couple of cars racing in practice. This is Al Capel, who was a very noted journalist, author of many books, lived down in Los Altos, and a Formula 3 car alongside of him, Sherwood Johnson. This is car number 99. It was another car built by Hagerman out in the East Bay. Beautiful car. This is Bob Gillespie driving it. He easily raced under number 13. Wasn't suspicious at all with number 13. He should have been. Okay. Here's Bill David again in his car, just like the previous car. Same guy built that car, built this with the Nerf bars on it and all. Bill David was, a big promoter of the races. Got to know him pretty well. Here's a shot of Bill David and Al Capel exiting the one left-hand turn in the circuit. Okay. And hay bales stacked up there for obvious reasons. In the background, you'll see an ambulance and a tow truck. So they're not taking any chances here. And it gets better, by the way. Here's a bunch of cars filing through at very high speed through the start-finish line. I'd say they're all 1,500cc cars, maybe 90 to 110 miles an hour. Yeah, too fast. Here's Al Capel again in his Allinger Special, number 23. When I did my Pebble Beach book, I wrote a book in 1980. I got the first 100 copies, and all the guys that I interviewed, I gave them the copy that corresponded with their race number they raced under. Little touches you do for people that help you out, okay? Here's, again, Al Capel exiting a right-hand turn. Hay bales stacked everywhere. But look at the proximity, again, of spectators. Look at how many men are wearing hats. Today, not ball caps, but regular hats, okay? Over here is the very first Porsche raced out here, Johnny von Neumann's car. This is an SL car. Right after the war in 1951, Dr. Porsche was asked to enter the Le Mans race, 24-hour race. This is the car that finished 20th overall, 1,100cc car, and won that war. The Germans were so nervous about racing in France afterwards, they hired 2 French co-drivers to race it. So, I mean, it was a lot of PR going into the darn thing, okay? Here's one of the Barlow Simcas going through here, and Barlow, again, here taking the flag from Al Torres at the finish line. Look at the spectator on the grandstand, the size of it. Look at the proximity. He's going 100 miles an hour right there. Something happens, wouldn't be good. Here he is, Roger Barlow, in the cockpit of his car. That emblem on his helmet is the Cal Club Sports Car Club out of L.A. Down there, they were more racers. Up north, we were more racers. But the SCCA people, they used to say, were more Concours people in L.A. They were more interested in pretty cars rather than fast cars. Sherwood Johnson became a very famous driver. He won the Formula 3 race. This is the legendary chassis 1850 Allard, Cat Allard of Tom Carson's, and the black hat leaning over. Bill Pollock raced this 7 wins in a row overall, a big Cadillac. In those days, 300 horsepower was a lot of horsepower. So here's the car up being attended to. Notice it has white sidewall tires. And the car also had red spoke wheels and had Nerf bars up front, in case you got into any action in a circuit. A Nerf bar is in case you get too close to another car or another car gets too close to you, it doesn't damage your radiator. It protects your radiator. Yeah, Nerf. That's right out of the midgets, okay? Anyway, he had 7 straight wins for the car. This is Shirley Edwards' second car, the R26. It was built on a Henry J chassis, which is part of the Kaiser people, and had a Chrysler Firepower Hemi in it. The thing had so much torque that the doors would fly open when he went around turns. So they had to bolt them closed. He had to jump over the top to get into the car. Okay, there wasn't a Le Mans start, so it was fine. This car was not terribly successful. The first car he had was the R26. This is the R62. Okay, here they are on the starting grid, and here's Bill Pollock alongside of Michael Graham. You know who Michael Graham was? Michael Graham was a RAF pilot from the Second World War. He flew Hurricanes, Spitfires, and later P-51s. The P-51 was actually built for the RAF, not for our forces. And that's how we got the Packard Merlin motor being made on the Rolls-Royce patent to be built here. And we go in those cars. You have a lot of things between aviation, sailing, and racing in cars that go on. Anyway, here's Michael Graham. Michael Graham used to stay with a fellow here, Barry Wagner, B-Wag. Barry Wagner had a house here, and he had a diorama in his bedroom in World War I symbolizing the German planes being shot down, shooting down the British plane with cotton pieces coming out of the back looking like smoke. And what Michael Graham would do is, because he's an RAF pilot, and Barry Wagner was of German background, he'd go to the bathroom and get a towel and hang it over the diorama. He didn't want to look at it. He said he'd been through there and done that. Here's the Allards going away at the starting line. Look at the chrome rack on the back of this, the Pollock car, white sidewalls. Why were they white sidewalls? Yeah, it was synthetic rubber at that time, and Carson's owned a meat packing company up in Tacoma, and he had these tires that were natural rubber. When the Japanese came down south, they took over all the natural rubber down in Indonesia. So rather than having synthetic rubber, these cars had the real rubber, a better bite for grip in terms of steering. And they were monster cars to drive. This next one shows the car sort of crossed up, coming through a left-hand turn. It's followed by Phil Hill in a 212 Barchetta coming down here. Here's Phil Hill, America's first world champion, going through the faster circuit here. You notice the number 4, which means A, B, C, D, Class D, coming through. Next one is Bill Pollock. He's looking at that front axle. There were twin beam axles going like this, and that the wheels just hop up and all over the place. That was taken by his brother, Bob. Here's again another shot. You can see the overhead in the background, which is where the freeway comes through now, exits out to 19th Avenue. Here he is driving with you had to have one spare tire aboard. They came with twins. So what they did was remove one to lighten the car up a little bit and put more weight on the other side. It's a left-hand drive car, so the tire is on the right side, offsetting the weight of the driver. Again, Pollock going through again. This is a man who was married to Phil Hill's sister, Helen, and Don Parkinson, a Hollywood-based architect. And he had this car built up very special. I got an award this last year at the Pebble Beach Concours, my 32nd year of judging there. And this car was sitting on the ramp when I was given the award. I thought it was giving the award to the car. No, the award was given to me. It was sort of a put-up deal. Okay? Here's what the car looked like the year before. He crashed it at Pebble Beach. So what happened, he took the body off that and had a special body built up. This man had a jinx at Pebble Beach. The next shot shows him doing a slow roll at turn 1 in a C-type Jaguar. Pretty incredible, bars and belts, etc. He landed up in a ditch upside down. There's a drainage ditch out there, and that's what flipped him over to begin with. See, by this time, you have the snow fencing in the back, holding the spectators back a bit. But that whole course was lined by pine trees all the way around. You went off the circuit and lost it. It was could be pretty tragic. So what he did was he landed upside down, and he crawls out the ditch from underneath the car. That's how he got out from underneath it, extracted himself. Here's Sterling Edwards driving the R62 through a turn, followed by a lightweight, what they call LT3 Jaguar, and followed by the Parkinson car. Again, here's Parkinson exiting the turn with an Allard behind him, and there's 2 Allards behind him. This is probably in practice. Here's a MG TD with a Willys Jeep motor in it, which was a hot rod job then, followed by Phil Hill. Again, the Allard, look at the caster angles on those front tires. Isn't that wild? How would you like to be driving that car, seeing those axles just going like this? I mean, there were very brave people that drove these cars. Great picture here of the guy in the blue. The dark one is Bill Pollock, and that's Phil Hill next to him after the race. They finished first and second. And here he is receiving the trophy for winning, okay? And here we have the race results for that year, mainly the Mayor's Cup and also the Guardsmen Cup, which is the under 1,500 cc and over 1,500 cc races. I'm going through this pretty quickly to keep your attention on it. Here's the program again, the same photograph in 53. Some people, the Guardsmen people, the race committee stayed the same. Some things changed. It did change in it, but you may recognize some of those faces and names. Okay. One of the people in there that was involved was Tiny Fleischacker. Tiny Fleischacker is the last row down of 4 on the far left. Tiny weighed over 300 pounds. Tiny. Herb Fleischacker was his brother, who I knew quite well, and both Tiny and Herb. And that's the Fleischacker Zoo, the same family that we have here in San Francisco. Okay, here's the SCCA officials. This fell down, the third one down. There's Al Capel's, the second one down on the left. And then the one below that is Ted Rothermill. Ted Rothermill had 2 great things he did. He was a head of crowd control as such. There was no crowd control. He always had pictures taken with his fingers crossed, that nothing would happen. He never wore any shoes. He was always barefooted out there. I mean, they're real characters. It gets better as we go along. Philip Westall was the second president of the Guardsmen, another civic leader, nice man. A lot of us knew him, and I knew him as well. Here's, again, the start-finish of the under 1,500 cc, mainly MGs. Again, another race. They had some novice races there, too. They shouldn't have. The novice races should have been held on the airport circuits, where if you make a mistake, there's not hell to pay as a result. Here's the next year, Michael Graham driving Shill Cavalli has bought the car, the Allinger Special. That's a Porsche Coupe you see in the background. 117, Chick Leeson. Anybody know that name from sailing? That's Chick Leeson. His cars were always painted that light French blue, about the color of your shirt, your jersey there. He always had those, and 117F. Look at that MGTD crossed up trying to get through that turn, sliding around behind it. Chick was the won the 1954 Pebble Beach race driving an Oscar AOSCA, which is built by the Maserati brothers. Okay. Which one? That one back here?
117. What is 117?
117 is a Simca special. Simca is basically Fiat licensed out Simca to build their 1100cc motors, and they hopped them up. They got about 90 to 95 horsepower out of them. Stangalini I raced in Formula Junior had the same motor in it. Here's, again, the number 66. That's Shill Cavalli's race number, probably Shill driving it. The next car is a car that was built up for Ken Miles. Ken Miles was involved with the development of the Ford GTs and also of the Cobras under Carroll Shelby, which went on to win in 1965. They beat Ferrari in the overall awards, and the GTOs were not easy to beat. So Pete Brock, does that name ring a bell with any of you? Pete Brock was a designer. 22 years of age, he designed a car that beat Ferrari, which is pretty nice. Here's again, number 9, Bill David, going through the circuit, going through a turn. Bill was always turned out very nicely, very handsome guy. He always had a nice full mustache, dark mustache. Look at the crowds in the background. Now they have snow fencing holding them back. A lot of good that's going to do if some guy loses it. Next circuit, you notice the flagman in the back? He's holding out a yellow flag. In other words, if something's happened up ahead, they warn the drivers if there's an obstruction up ahead. With green flag means go, black flag means you're out. Pull into the pits. You've done something bad. And that's Ken Miles catching up with him at this part of the circuit. By the way, you notice that there's no outlines, there's no center line on the road. This is the roads as they were in 1953. Okay? Here's Ken Miles coming through in his R1 Special. Became a very famous car. He won in the rain in '53 at Pebble Beach with the same car. Here they are getting closer at the circuit. Here are the people, the spectators in the background, hay bales up there. The Oscar car is being featured this year at the Pebble Beach Concours. And I'll be taking part in a forum along with one of the Maserati family and also with the Orsi family who acquired the Maserati company. This is the Trotter Aston Martin from Stockton. This was Phil Hill's first sports car, and this guy bought it from him. He later put a GMC truck motor in the car for racing. That's a C-type Jaguar, followed by Phil Hill this next year and others behind him. A lot of specials. This is a Healy going by with Allard, and here's Bill Pollock in the C-type Jaguar, a green and brown combination. You don't see it in this photo, but quite a car. Now we're getting into sort of more action shots. This comes into, again, in '53. And you got the rebodied car. The car on the right with a white helmet is the original Edwards R26, rebodied with cycle fenders to get it more streamlined. The car on his right, or the left of the picture, is a Pinolina. He's very famous for one thing. In practice, he didn't look at what the circuit was and where it went. He wound up missing the turn and driving all the way out to the seashore, the far end of the park, until somebody came up and said, the race is back that way. It's back that way, okay? Okay, how many of you ate Wheaties when you were young people? Wheaties here? Do you remember Jack Armstrong, the All-American boy on radio? You're looking at Jack Armstrong, the Jack Armstrong in that Allard. The Jack Armstrong, who I had the privilege to get to know, quite a guy, and he rode a skull out to Santa Catalina from L.A. He did this power thing. He had to go out and ride these skulls going out there in that water. Of course, they had safety boats going alongside of them, and that's Maston Gregory in a C-type Jaguar who went on to win that race. Again, back into practice with Al Capel's Oscar, followed by a C-type. Again, here we are between Armstrong and 30 and number 58, Maston Gregory. Maston Gregory actually went to Europe and raced in Europe before Phil Hill and Carroll Shelby did. He was very early at doing it. Here's Phil Hill coming through a turn in his 250 mm, 0260 mm, if you want, into serial numbers. And that's followed by Bill Pollock in the C-type. This car was a very pretty car. This car is sitting over in Pat Otis' shop now in Berkeley being worked on. It recently sold for umpty-ump money. A lot of money gone out. These cars were maybe $6,000 cars to begin with. You're looking at something that's worth somewhere between 10 and 15 million right now. Yeah, they're out of sight. They're out of sight, really. Here's Phil Hill going through a turn and followed by Barry Wagner driving the R26 rebody into cigar shape. Here is a local boy from Sausalito, John Fox, driving an Allard. We used to call him Foxy John. We used to reverse his name. He was a character. Now, we remember seeing the pictures here of Maston Gregory in 58C and number 30 with Jack Armstrong. Well, guess what? Maston overcooked it. He spun out. You see him facing the wrong way here. And look in the background. The photographers all trying to get photos of it up on the side. A few trees along the way. But he realized, oops, I really screwed up. Here's Sterling Edwards driving a C-type. On the left, he just spun out. So the things were not, the cars were going faster. The drivers didn't have the experience of going that fast on a very tight circuit, okay? And this is the way it was. Here's Sterling having recovered, number 26. He had a car, a red one like this, and another driver, another mechanic got in his car and crashed it because he had some problems with the chassis. He strolled down the pit in Pebble Beach and bought number 23 out from another driver. You'll see a 6 painted over a 3 there. It used to be 23, Al Capel's car. It's just all the things done in sport, you know. Here are the cars. Here's Pino again. Oh, boy. He now figures out where the race car is. He's knocked out the windmills, the far end of the park. He's back. Okay? But even he loses it. Number 15, D. So it's a 2.3-liter Ferrari. And he finally overcooked it. I mean, these tires were very narrow. Anybody know who Fran Gonzalez was? He was a Ferrari driver back then. Gonzalez weighed about 250 pounds on about a 5'8" chassis. His Fangio's good friend from Argentina. And he used to come up to the new cars with tires this wide. He says, back in my days, he says, the tires were skinny and the drivers were fat. So that was, you remember these little vignettes. Here he is, Pino again. Going through, followed by a Baldwin following him. Next, a glass bar special, a fiberglass car, about the time the Corvettes were coming out in 53, 54, and a C-type Jaguar following him. Over here is Phil Hill coming through. Look at the light and shadow on the circuit. You know, it's not just all sunny like all these pictures appear to be. You go through a lot of light and shadow. A lot later it got in the day, that's the way it was. Over on the right is Sam Weiss's Chrysler Allard parked, a DNF. In other words, he had some problems mechanically with the car. Okay, here's that Willys MG spinning out, followed by Edwards in the C-type Jaguar, and by Pino. Pino learned his lesson. I spun here before. I'm not going to spin again. Okay, here's the race results in 53. Again, you have a lot of cars being shown up. Notice how many Porsches all of a sudden are on there. MGs used to rule the roost in the under 1,500cc. Now Porsche is taking over. I do a talk on Pebble Beach road races. The early years I call it the British car years. In about 53, I call it the spoilers because the Italian and German cars started showing up. Oscars, Maseratis, Ferraris. And as a matter of fact, Ferrari at Pebble Beach won 53 every year through 56. So that was the car to own. Sometimes they were good for about 6 months. Not because they were broken down, because the new model would come out and it was faster. I mean, it was a continual hype deal going. But here you go, and there's Maston Gregory winning the Jag with Jack Armstrong in second and the over 15 Don Parkes in third. Okay? Again, the same program cover, but they add a little red strip across the top to adjust it up. Here's what the Guardsmen, bigger list now. This is getting serious. All the Guardsmen, these are all businessmen in San Francisco who are donating their time for the campership drive. It was a hell of a good deal. Remember Jock Swain or John Swain? Anybody remember him? Yeah, great guy. He has 3 sons, Eric, Jock, and Peter, and all really nice people. And he was the car man. There's a picture. He's the last chairman. Again, here's the SCCA officials. You see Capel, middle up at the top, Al Capel. I think he authored something like 12 books. Al Torres, the starter, coming down. Mary Jane Rothermel. Now you see in the lower right-hand corner of Ted Rothermel. See the fingers crossed? He's got the telephone in it, and he's got his fingers crossed. He knows the camera's on him. So he's hamming it up a little bit. Here's a Porsche chassis 03. The first 4-cam Fuhrman car. That's Johnny Von Neumann, who was a dealer down in Southern California, his wife, Eleanor. And the car, and this is at the Golden Gate Park races, is painted red by this time. Next shot is a shot of a VW Special that was built up and developed on here. And they always said this guy who drove this car had the face of a choir boy but the heart of a devil. He'd get out there and he'd just drive the holy hell out of the car. Very fast. He won the very first Laguna Seca race, by the way, in November 57. Here's the lineup. Notice the crowd. Right up there next to it, a few hay bales separate them. This is probably about 90 miles an hour the cars come through here. Again, I can't stress enough, and see the rope going across the front of the spectators on the side. That's all that's retaining them. All that's holding them back. Okay. Here's a little Crosby Special going across Harry Irely, and here's Ken Miles in an MGTF taking the flag from Al Torres. Here's Bill David, who won his Oscar that year, his wife with him, Here's Bill. Here's that mustache I referred to earlier. And here's the Baldwin Special, the last year that Bill Pollock raced. This was Mr. Baldwin from Santa Barbara, and this car was also raced at Pebble Beach in 54 and 55. Here he is on the circuit with a car. A lot of specials came out of it. Now, this photo is Jim Lowe in a Fraser Nash Le Mans replica. The car that you see in the middle is Charlie Rizzaghi. You remember Charlie Rizzaghi? Any hands? Charlie Rizzaghi? Cadillac Charlie? Charlie Rizzaghi always raced with a lit cigarette in his mouth. Can you imagine? A lit cigarette. You could see this visor he has, and you see the smoke coming out from underneath it. I don't know. I guess he needed calming down. I don't know what it was. Lou Barrow. Lou Barrow was quite a racer. This is a Jaguar, and he's just gone a little too fast at turn 5, and he's into the hay. So they had incidents. Fortunately, the hay bales are there for a reason. You can see what. They finally slow the car down a bit. Austin Healey spinning out the Golden Gate races. And this is the next one is Bill Stroop. Anybody know that name? Bill Stroop. Curtis, the one short wheelbase Curtis 500 built, Mercury flathead, all hotted up. And he was the one that ran the Lincoln team at the Carrara when they won 3 years in a row in the open classes in Carrara. Look what's happening over here on the right. The guy sprinting away from the accident. A photographer got a little too close to things, and the car is crashing into the hay bales, and this guy is trying to get the devil out of there as fast as he can. Here's Barrow again with the cutaway fenders up in front to get more air into the brakes. I have my favorite slide when I do the Pebble Beach deal is I always say, how many laps do you think the drum brakes on a Jaguar 120 would last? 1 lap? Okay. 2 laps maybe? 3 laps? I said, must be lap 3. Here's the car going into the hay bales. That's the way it was. Okay. Next slide. This is a Juar and Sam Weiss in a 55 Jag. And here's our friend Cadillac Charlie in his 102E. You can't see it, but he has a lit cigarette. Okay. Seata, a very pretty little 2-liter, small V8, 120 cubic inch car. Very pretty little car. They bring a time. And this is winner Jack McAfee, and the 105 was a 375 Ferrari in 1954. Here he is taking the checkered flag from Al Torres, who was a starter. He's hitting about 125 at that point. So that even the flag man has to have a lot of guts to get out there and be standing 5 feet away from a car going by, going like this. This is one of the most interesting photos I have. That's Sterling Edwards in his 340 mm Ferrari, finished second to Jack McAfee. Look at the look on his wife's face, Marion, looking at Edwards going on and on and on and on about how great the race was. Very skeptical. She said, come on, enough of this. She's a great lady. When we did the Pebble Beach book, they were divorced by this time, had 3 sons. But she invited us all back and cooked dinner for us when we interviewed the whole Barry Wagner and Sterling Edwards for the book. This next shot is Jack McAfee and his wife. And the foreground, everybody thinks that's their child, their son. No. A guy named Tony Paravano owned the car. He was dressed sort of shabby, and the police would not let him come up to the winning car, which was his car. Ron, his son, snuck through. That's Ron Paravano. He snuck through and he got in the lap of Jack McAfee with the cup, holding the cup and everything. That's how things were in those days. Got a wreath of flowers around his neck for being the winner. I got to know Jack pretty well. He lived down in Morro Bay. So here's the results again. Porsches in there in the novice race, in the under 1,500 cc race, and then over here, the second one is the senior races. To be a senior racer, you had to race 3 races and be approved and be watched and observed. You just see Oscar, Porsche, Oscar, MG, some MG specials. Michael Graham, again, he's the RAF pilot. Anybody know what skin grafts were, how they were pioneered? Jeffrey Page, if you see these movies and you see this very disfigured face from the RAF, the Spitfire movie and all that. And it's this guy. He was flying a Hurricane and got shot down during the Battle of Britain, defending Britain. And they had a scuttle tank, and it burnt right back through the cockpit and burned the skin off his face. He went through 21 skin grafts, painful things to go through them. And the skin is taken off your leg, inside of your legs, and grafted up here. There's one doctor in the world that did this. They said, "You will not, Mr. Page, you will never fly again, let alone combat." You don't say that to an RAF pilot. He said, "The hell I won't. I will come back and I will down one German plane for every skin graft I had." He did it. I mean, this is what you don't hear about these things. These are the great stories, and I'm privileged, and I knew Michael Graham, who was the wingman to Jeffrey Page, okay? So going back to the circuit, what it looked like, it's up on the deal. It's a very primarily right-hand turns until you get down to this little Z thing at the bottom, and now you got a left-hand turn into right-hand turns. Over here, when you see all the way out here on the far left, that's where Pino didn't make the turn. He kept going all the way out to the surf. Something's not right here. There's nobody else around me. It's just very quiet out here. Somebody comes, I said, "It's back there." about a mile back. Okay. Again, Bill Pollock, more shots of him going through it. Bill and I became very good friends. He recently passed away. His father was Lou Pollock. Who's into music here? Anybody into music? Anybody remember the song Charmaine? His father wrote Charmaine, amongst other things. Here's Bill, and there the Jaguars and all that. There's that car in green and brown, last shot. So that's my talk today. I took you through it fast. I didn't want to lose you at any point. Hopefully I didn't. And so we're going to end the slideshow. Just walk behind here. Yeah.
Okay, good. You got it?
Thank you.
Yeah. Just unplug things, yes. Don't worry about it. Welcome again to our Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Our speaker today is Bob Devlin, St. Francis member and sailor and car racer and historian. He's even written a few books. Bob, a couple questions. A little bit about famous people who are also sailors and car racers. Talk a little bit about Briggs Cunningham.
Well, Briggs Cunningham was a race car developer and builder as well. He took his cars, Chrysler powered, to Le Mans. First cars American with American drivers. I think they finished third and fourth 2 years. And then he finally converted over to Jaguar and did race other cars. But the America's Cup, the Columbia, which you have the half model out here in your room, was a great deal. I still have the America's Cup program from that year.
1958.
Very, very fine gentleman. Old school. He was part of the ARCA, Automobile Racing Club of America. The Collier brothers of Collier Magazine and all that ran back east. They had a little track on their own property, and this is where they basically had racing buckboards when they were teenagers. And they got to know most of the Collier brothers, Barron, Miles, and Sam were the three. So long history. He's a gentleman sportsman. A dying age person is no more with us, but those people don't exist anymore. He raced himself, but he also promoted other people in racing. And there's a who's who of people, including Phil Hill, who raced for him.
Innovative person. Everybody knows what the Cunningham is. In fact, Briggs Cunningham invented that tool with which we change the forward left shape, increasing Cunningham generally and greater breeze. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned white wall tires. I didn't understand, what's the reason why we had white wall tires? Was there some competitive advantage with different kind of...
The white wall tires were for his fleet of cars. He ran this meatpacking business, Tom Carson's. And there were only synthetic rubber available. See, synthetic rubber was invented during World War II. It's an American invention. We didn't have the real thing. You got DuPont, and there's a lot of synthetics being used in the old different cord linings going into the tires. Tire technology took off. The Japanese monopolized all the natural rubber in Southeast Asia. So they didn't have any access to it. And so what he did, they had this alloy with a terrific torque and power in it, a great big hot motor, Cadillac motor in it, and they needed to have better bike, both in front and up the front with that damn suspension going up and down in front of them. I mean, it's crazy driving that car. You wouldn't catch me driving one, I'll tell you that, even for fun, let alone getting mad and driving it fast and racing. So he reused the extra tires he had and put them on the car. And Bill Pollock has written a book about that car called Red Wire Wheels and White Sidewalls. I mean, and the guy was a bit of a showman. He was a bit of a showman, Carson's. He ran midgets up in the Pacific Northwest before that, midget race cars on dirt. And he was just, again, like Briggs Cunningham type guy, a sportsman.
So what was top speed, and what was the length of a lap on the course?
A lap around that circuit is 3.1 miles. That's a whole mile longer than Pebble Beach, 2.1 miles. About 8 turns. They did change the start-finish line from about halfway up that long straightaway back towards the end, beginning to slow the cars down so the timekeepers, the people who were counting laps, could see the cars not going by at 100, but going by at 40. So that's why they moved it back that way. Bill Pollock talks about the C-type Jaguar the last year he drove, and how he had to pull off into an area right where the bison were. The bison are behind these are buffaloes behind a big fence. And he said, oh, they weren't happy with all the noise we were making going around there. He says, I got the heck out of there as fast as I could. Pollock was a very charming man. And his wife was also, Bobby, his brother was a photographer. But there were characters that don't exist today. You can't get away with that, first of all. Think about the mayor of San Francisco sticking his neck out for a racing in Golden Gate Park. Think about it. Can't be done. Was, but can't be done. Never to be repeated.
And so 8 laps or so, is that what you said?
No, it was the 100. These were sprint races, 100 miles. The big races, the novice races were about 30 miles. So you have probably, 33 laps,
okay,
3.1 mile to get around there, maybe 34 laps.
So they'd have how many races a day?
They would have, beginning with the novice races were on Saturday and the senior races were on Sunday with practice sessions in between, et cetera. And so it was each race lasted about an hour, and they'd take a break. And then, of course, the whole idea was to raise money for tickets, and nobody snuck into this place. They had to pay a ticket to get in. A herd number of $10 to get into the race. I mean, you can't go near a race today for less than maybe 1,000 Grand Prix races, et cetera, like the one up in Canada this last weekend. But this was a thing that they, at the noon hour, they did promotions for the students, the people, the underprivileged children that were going to go to Camper Chef, which it was a fine role that the Guardsmen came up with. And that was their whole thing. The Christmas tree lot, to this day, benefits the same thing. They're out to do the same thing, the right thing. San Francisco doesn't take, I'm sorry, this will not be a political statement, but it doesn't take the government of San Francisco to do everything. This was private. This was the Guardsmen, a volunteer group doing this. Amazing what they pull off.
So top speed. Fastest cars are going how fast?
Fastest car, I would say, was probably 130.
130.
Because they had a couple long straights there. But most of them were met with turns that were being taken at 40 to 50. Mm-hmm. So we all take it for granted that all cars had disc brakes. You all have disc brakes on all your cars, whether you know it or not. You don't have drum brakes. Unless you really have an old car. I have an old car that has drum brakes on it still, the 59 Porsche. So disc brakes came from the aircraft industry. Do you know that most of those aircraft land out here at San Francisco at about 125? They're putting down tires. They're not rotating. That's why you see the black marks when the tires go in there. The brakes go on. They reverse the engines. They pull off. I'm a pilot. I was delivering Cessna from Del Monte Aviation in Monterey to the dealership on the end of the runway at 28 left at San Francisco Airport. You call in, a couple of us are coming in, we want you to be on the right rather than the left, and you're going to go all the way down, and the plane's landing are the same as your highest speed you can fly, 125. So you get down about 25 feet off the pavement and going full bore, 125. And when you look over your shoulder, the C-54 or whatever it is, it's landing, all prop planes landing, finally puts down. Now you can ease down. And you land on the last 10% of the runway for Butler Aviation, which is at the far north end, if you're familiar with that. Mm-hmm.
So hay bales. So the fastest.
I think 125, 130.
So fastest speed 125/30. Speed of the turns 40 miles an hour. Now talk to me about a hay bale at 40 miles an hour. Talk to me about hitting a hay bale at 40 miles an hour.
Well,
how often did that happen?
I never did.
Got it.
I can't tell you first person.
We assume this is going to be a vicarious recount. But essentially a hay bale at 40 miles an hour is not going to do a whole lot. At what high speed is a hay bale going to be protected?
They're heavy enough when you're down to 40 miles an hour, and if you miss the turn, or if you're going 50, you should be going 40 to slow you down enough and to keep you away from the crowd. The big thing was they stacked them too high. Anything to do it, and it was sort of an intimidation to the drivers. Remember, your drum brakes only last so long. And those guys you see going into the bales have lost their brakes. They go down a gear or two. They have 4-speed gearboxes, except for the Ford or Lincoln transmission, Zephyr gears were 3-speed. So you only go down from, you use first to start, and you're really racing the race in second and third gear around the circuit.
And so when you do hit a hay bale, you're kind of spun out, you're going sideways, so you're not going 40 anymore.
You hit the bale, and then you try to get it in reverse as fast as you can because you're embarrassed as hell, and you want to get back on the circuit, but the flagman is holding you. It's got to be safety coming out. And one thing I didn't mention to you, overhead, there are flags at each turn, no passing zones. Be going into the turn and going after the turn. So you don't pass with that. You'll get black flagged or warned if you pass. They were trying to create safety a little too late. Remember the rope going across in front of the spectators? That's how it started.
So roll bars. I didn't see a lot of roll bars.
No roll bars. Roll bars came in 58 the first time. And the first top techs, what they call Snell helmet, is common today, also in 58. Doc Snively from Sacramento, where I'm from, was the guy that did that after a driver was killed up in Arcata, and they named it after that. And that's Bill Snell, and that was the Snell Foundation. And Bill and Top Techs were separate companies at that time. One was a full jet helmet, and the other one had a leather sides. I still have my helmets. The first one I had was a cork line helmet, not very good. Well, the Snell Foundation came out with a non-resilient liner went around. The impact comes in like this. It spreads it like a T. Instead of it going in straight in, it spreads it out around the helmet, which actually worked pretty well. Not that I know firsthand, but...
Seat belts. I remember when Sterling Hayden was against them at one point, like 59 or so.
Yeah.
Talk about the history of seat belts.
Seat belts were optional when I first started racing in 57. I had them. Yeah, I believe that I'm not one of these people, and I'll give you an example of that didn't believe in seat belts. Maston Gregory, guy I mentioned before, who won in 53 with a C-type Jaguar that was famous for losing control of a car. Before it hit a berm or went crashed, he stood up and projected himself out. He didn't want to be trapped and caught fire in a deal. It was his mind. He wore these big Coke bottle glasses on it. I don't know whether he could see the instruments or whatever, or even the circuit, but he was famous for jumping out of a car as it impacted.
And wasn't that Sterling Hayden's original argument? He said he didn't want to be there when it's on fire, so he wanted to get out as quick as he could, and somebody couldn't get out with a seatbelt once, and he wanted to get out.
My argument is I'd rather have the protection on impact of the seatbelt holding me in it, and then it's up to me to get the hell out of there if it's a fire. We didn't have fire extinguishers aboard either. No suppressors built in like they have in cars today. We've come a long way. We've come a long way in terms of safety.
And seatbelts are clearly an advantage. And now with shoulder straps, all cars have those.
Yeah, well, the
Significant
three-point
advantage.
harnesses came later. When my Formula racing days, I had a 3-point harness. And last car I raced was Lotus 20. I didn't own the car. And it was a recliner. I could sit upright on the 18 that Mary will tell you about. And the 20 was a lay down. Lay down was one thing. The only way you can get in the car is the steering wheel had a latch on the back would lift off. You get in there, and then they put the wheel back on. Between your legs, between your knees, the battery was sitting there. Your legs had to go around the battery to get your clutch, brake, and accelerator pedal. Your legs had to bow out around the battery. This was Lotus's idea of equalizing, because the engine in the back, getting more weight up forward, putting the battery up in front of you. The driver had to go legs around the battery. Not a very comforting thing when you start thinking about fire. And the gas tank runs right across the scuttle. Okay? Same thing.
So heel and toe. Everybody in those days was driving, manual transmissions, 4 speeds usually. Heel and toe. Explain to everybody who doesn't know. Who knows what heel and toe means in racing cars? Exactly. Some people who don't. So explain what you're doing with your feet when you're driving, downshifting and so on.
Well, you get in a bit of a trance when you're out there. You get into a method. You have mirrors, and you're looking around you. Safety is an important point. You also, if you own your own car, you don't want to smash it up. Okay? There's a cost to that, aside from life and limb. And what you're doing with your feet is something called heel-toe. Anybody know what heel-toe is?
Just said.
When you're braking, you're getting full braking power in on your right foot. And then you roll over on your throttle to blip for your downshifts, equalizing RPM. That's how it's done, called heel and toe.
You rev up the engine to equal the RPM in the new gear.
Yeah, whatever. If you know the gear spread is 700 or 800 RPMs between gears, that's how much you rev up to get a smooth. These are semi-synchronous transmissions.
Semi-synchronous.
Yeah. You don't have to hesitate. You can outshift the shifters anyway if you want to. But your transmission doesn't hold up as well, as long. And they're pretty fragile. I'm thinking about the Formula Junior. The Corvette RPO I raced in 58 and 59 was a 4-speed. They came out with a 4-speed in 57, the fuel injection in 57, 58, which my car was, quad headlights. I teach the course at the Academy of Art here called The History of Automotive Design. So I go through with my students. I've had 120 students go through me now in 8 semesters. And it's really amazing what they come up with. I have to tell them, we've got to go down to the candy store and see the brass era cars and all that. I said, it gets better as we get along, get towards the cars you really like, the cars that you know you'd like to own today. So we finally get up to the 1945 after World War II, and we go into discussing what happened in the milestone era. And a lot of things happened. Of course, Ferrari came out. Ferraris weren't built before the war. Ferraris came out. Pininfarina designed most of those cars. Great designer. Turing was another one that designed them. And some of them designed cars and other people built them. But the designers were... it's a very interesting thing. I introduced the idea of design, style, and fashion. Think about it, fashion. You know that Harley Earl was head of General Motors Art and Color Layer Design course. He hired 11 women to come in and design, called the Damsels of Design. He brought them in, and Bill Mitchell took over, and only one was left, the best-looking one. he was a very interesting guy and very profane. His language was terrible, and I dated Harley Earl's daughter, Susie, for a short period of time back in Grosse Pointe. I worked at both Ford and General Motors for brief periods of time. But I find it very fascinating, the cars, what happened with cars. Here's a story. Anybody know what a 944 Porsche is?
Sure.
It's half of a 928 motor, a V8 motor, half, same bore stroke, and it lays at the V at an angle like this, just like the other the V8 does.
Just like one half of
They were
V8.
trying to develop a counter-rotational shaft because it's a 4-cylinder motor, and you get a lot of vibrations, 2 up and 2 down. And they wanted a counter-rotational shaft that went twice the speed of the motor in the opposite direction. Every time they did it, they were coming in on a Lancaster shaft from 1904 for the 4-cylinder RAF training planes that had the counter-rotational shaft. Now, 17 years went by, and guess who picked up that patent? Mitsubishi, the Japanese company. They kept the thing, and every 17 years they renewed it on the shelf, never used it. Porsche had to pay a royalty to Mitsubishi for every 944 built to put that counter-rotational shaft in. And I owned one. My wife owned one. My deceased wife owned one. It was a great car for a 4-cylinder car. Don't feel badly about Porsche having to pay that. Do you know that every road car, Ferrari, Maserati, and Lancia, and Alfa Romeo builds has to pay Porsche for the Porsche Synchro? Now, guess who's out ahead in that? Royally, they're way out ahead. I'm not talking about race cars. I'm talking about road cars, okay?
So notice, no, I didn't see Mercedes, very few Healys, no Alphas. Talk about where they were later. When did they start showing up in the Bay Area racing scene?
Well, I have I recently owned an Alfa Sprint Speciale, a Giulia model, a 65, 66, neat car. It has a coefficient of drag of 0.24, which is a very low drag coefficient. And very
who's the
interesting car.
designer? Who designed the body?
It's a very smooth
who designed it?
aerodynamic body with a cam flat back end on. All the cars today have that cam back end to get the air tumbling down. Pete Brock decided you can't have a roof line that you have air tumbling. You want the air to stick to the roof and smoothly go by it. And you have to come down at 11 to 12 degrees, no more, down to a big cam. And you'll look at the Daytona, the height of the car, that cam back end, that flat back end is 50% of the height of that. And that's how the car was so fast. See, the Cobras Roadsters would peak out 165, and the GTO Ferraris would go right by them. So they had to go 185 when they did it. They came back and won. It was a great victory for Ford and for Shelby and for Pete Brock, who's been a friend of mine since we've been about 18 years of age.
So horsepower in the range, and I've been asking questions, but if I see a question out here, please hold your hand up. Mark Lambros will bring the microphone to you, so we'd love to have questions from the audience. So horsepower, talk about the horsepower in the different divisions. Everybody, if you've got a question, hold your hand up for Mark.
Yeah. Well, horsepower on the cars today, you don't get by with less than 300. With 3 liters, that's pretty good, 100 horsepower per liter. And the cars today, these supercars of 500 to 700 horsepower, it's too much power to put down the road. Race cars that are very light, weighing under 1,500 pounds with that kind of power, they just about shake themselves apart. And they're mainly big American V8s, including McLaren, and the new Bugatti that's come out. We're talking about cars that for the road that will go over 200 miles an hour. Where are you going to find a place to drive a car at 200 miles an hour? And if you do, they ought to find a good psychiatrist first. That's what they need, is someone to talk them out of it. And say, don't do this.
We're going to come back to that question about where people were racing cars off track in those days after we hear from Julia with a question from Facebook Live.
Actually, just a couple comments. One from Jim Foley, who says Bob really knows his stuff. And
you got him going, Bob.
Who are you talking about?
The guy you paid to call in. Remember?
He's my friend. Come on over here. My brother, we were separated at the hip.
He also reminds us that today the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix in Shenley Park continues the tradition of road racing in city parks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Alex Kent has a whole series, but the Guardsmen are now linked with the Hillsborough Concourse and the Tour Delegates out of Burlingame. A great event. And on a side, London Breed is now mayor of San Francisco.
Right. Well, yeah.
Rank.
It's fascinating, a lot of the observations people make. You wish you had more time to talk about a subject that's dear to your heart. The older I get, the slower I drive. My wife out here, Betsy, always reminds me to drive carefully. And I always say, is it any other way? The only way you stay out of problems is looking around you. See you, Lee. I'm coming to his talk in a couple of weeks.
Harvey has a question.
Harvey.
Bob, you mentioned safety just now, and I was wondering.
Late in the talk, you mentioned safety.
Pardon?
Late in the talk.
You mentioned safety, and the safety provisions weren't very great. We saw a lot of those cars turning into the bales of hay. How many cars finished? How many had accidents? And were there ever any serious accidents?
Well, going back to Pebble Beach, it's sort of a sad story. Ernie McAfee was the fatality. My wife, Betsy, was right across the road from the accident when it happened. We were not married. We were boyfriend and girlfriend from the 5th grade on, but we were not married at that point. And
but she's not nearly as old as you are.
Yeah, she was married before, and I was married before, but that's a different story. Ernie McAfee missed a shift coming down and went into a pine tree, and his head was the first thing to hit. Ernie and his wife, Jean, were staying with my soon-to-be in-laws, along with the owner of the car. So when I married Tom Bunn's daughter, this is the lettuce king of Salinas, his daughter, Penny, I told him, Tom, you'll never have to go through this again. I'm quitting racing. That was it. You know, there's some things that beyond boating and racing and flying, I'm a pilot as well, that are important. And you got to look out for, you never know, what your crazy thing you're doing may take out somebody else's life, maybe a child with it. I always admire and get a big smile on my face with the women driving through my neighborhood at 40 and 45 miles an hour with a sign in the back window, baby on board. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe how they don't think about what they're doing. We men usually take longer than you women to grow up and mature. Like me, some of us never do.
So were there any fatalities ever in the Golden Gate?
Yeah, that was the one, it's not at Golden Gate Park.
In Golden Gate, were there any fatalities?
No fatalities
Any
there.
serious accidents in the Golden Gate races?
Yeah, were only people that you saw going to hay bales and things like
So
that.
not a serious accident.
Yeah, nothing serious. Bill Pollock's experience with a bison was one of the funniest ones. To hear him talking about it. He said, I have never moved faster in my life. Getting away from that fence, I had to park his car right up against. Here's these buffaloes looking at him like.
So looking back at the first car races in San Francisco, those along Marina Boulevard. Now those were right after the Pan Pacific Exposition.
It was during the exhibition.
It was during the exhibition.
Yeah, the start-finish line was out here on. It was a combination wood, dirt, and pavement track. Dario Resta, it's an Italian but a British citizen, came in and won it, both that and the Vanderbilt a couple of weeks later. He won the U.S. Grand Prix in the rain. The first race will run rain or shine. They ran it.
And that went along Marina Boulevard into the Presidio?
I have a diagram if someone would like to see it of the track up here. But for me to go into that, it'd be another 20 minutes.
How fast were those? How fast were those cars?
Those cars were 90 to 100 was a pretty good speed back in 1915. Are you aware that the very first car to put four-wheel brakes on it was a Duesenberg, 1915? If you look at the curved dash Oldsmobile, 1901, which has a single engine underneath the seat, you look at the wheels, they look like bicycle wheels, not a brake on the car. But they would only go about 5 miles an hour. So if you want to slow down, you put your foot out and drag it, you know?
So when you were racing, you raced from 57 to 62, I thought you said.
1957 to 62.
So if I count right, that's 5 years or so. And how many races a year?
6 years.
6 years? How many races a year would you do?
It was about an even amount of 5 to 7 races in Northern California, 5 to 7 races in Southern California.
And these were mostly gentlemen racers, not people who were pros.
Yeah, there was all amateur until the end. When with the Formula Juniors, we were part of USAC, which runs Indy. So we were part of USAC. I still have my USAC license. They should come and take it away from me.
And when
in case I get funny ideas.
And when you weren't on a track, were there other places that were non-track, you know, parts of the road where there was minimal traffic where you would go racing around in your sports car?
No, I didn't. I didn't do that on the open road. I always told people the only place to race is on a racetrack. You see these guys racing cars, coming down and racing each other on the road. It's the most dangerous thing that can happen. I was driving back with Ed Gilbertson. You ever know Ed Gilbertson was the head judge at Pebble Beach for years? And Ed and I have been judging for 40 years in cars, Concord. We're coming back up 280, and two guys are driving, racing each other, coming up. I could see them way in the window, and I have a white Porsche Speedster. They're following up. They come by me. A bus is a fully loaded bus is ahead of me, and they come by me going about 95 to 100 miles an hour. I'm going 70. You can pretty well calculate half again your speed. And they collide as they both try to take the lane in front of the bus, and they collide, and the bus goes up on three wheels. I put the blinker on. I said, Ed, stay in the car. I stop all the cars behind me. I go up to the bus driver, tell him my name, and give him a card. I said, call me. I've just gone and looked. There's nobody alive in those cars. There are 5 dead young men for having fooled around and done such a stupid thing. Those impressions stay with you. Don't race on the road. That's not a place for it. And usually young men, you think by age 25 or 30 they should know better, but they don't. It's usually male, but increasingly more female drivers are driving like men, which is not a positive aspect.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I think I've done a lot of racing, and I think the most dangerous course was the last races on public roads in San Francisco, and that was at Candlestick Park. And I did 3 laps and came in and said, somebody's going to get killed here, and they did, actually.
You did.
Yeah.
What kind of course was that? Talk about that course, Bob.
Dave Ridenauer. Yeah.
Right.
And that thing was on parking lots, and the pavement was very uneven. Your car would bottom out, and the works, it was a mess. Matter of fact, I heard it was so bad I didn't even go out to see them.
So give us a little information. How long was the track? How fast were the cars going?
Which one?
The one in Candlestick that you're talking about?
Well, Candlestick was just a big squared area around the parking lot, the deal, all the way around it. I don't think they went more than 100 around there. Maybe, you tell me, what speed do you think you were going?
Maybe about 100.
Yeah.
And so
you can
the answer
disagree
was
with
100,
me if you want. That's all
100,
right.
and this is around the outside parking lot of Candlestick
around
Park.
the stadium. Yeah, yeah.
So from what year to what year were people racing?
Yeah, right.
In the mid-'60s,
Yeah.
when the Candlestick Park was happening. Candlestick opened in '58, as I recall.
Yeah.
Well,
And so there was racing after
it was
that.
shortly after
Yeah, it was just after it was
64,
opened.
65.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
It's a period, to be frank with you, I just soon forget. I said it was a mistake doing what they did. They did it down in L.A., the same thing down in L.A., and the same thing happened. Up north, in those years, back in those years, before the purpose-built tracks like Laguna Seca, Vacaville, Sonoma Raceway were built, there were only 2 races that were run on normal roads, and that was Pebble Beach and Golden Gate Park. Okay, this is circa the period I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay, 50s into 60s. Then you had, in 57, both Riverside Raceway and Laguna Seca open in November of 57. Great circuits. I raced at Laguna Seca probably 6 or 7 times. A lot of different cars. It was a driver's circuit. The new circuit is, yeah.
So, Bobby, so what about scary moments? Tell us about a scary moment in racing your car.
The what?
A scary moment.
Oh,
racing
scary
your
moment?
car.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a scary moment for me was probably realizing that I was about to blow up a car.
Where was this?
If I was going to say, if I was going to finish, I was leading a race in a Corvette, and I saw the temperature gauge going up, and that was a scary moment. I had a decision to make. I only had 2 more laps to go, and I tried to make it, and I didn't.
Tell me a silly story.
That's where you say, you dummy. I won't use the exact language I said to myself, but dumb is the right first word.
Tell me a funny thing. Tell me a funny thing that happened while racing car. Tell me a funny story of something.
I think the great experience were at the awards banquets afterwards. I attended an awards banquet for Sterling Edwards, and he bought Alfonso de Portago's car. He's the guy that crashed in the Mille Miglia in 57, killing all those people and ended the Mille Miglia race in Italy, de Portago. And he bought de Portago's 750 Monza. It was a 735 Monza, actually. And the car came in primer color. It wasn't painted. And so he got second place to Phil Hill in 55.
At the awards banquet, they gave him a trophy for second place, well placed in the rain, racing. He's the founder of the races, Edwards Wire Cable Company in South San Francisco. And he, at the awards banquet, they gave him a can of paint. Paint your car. Those are funny things. I mean, the people had, and then Al Capel had a group. He wrote under his own name by Scott Warren, Shamal Laid. Shamal Laid means ugly camel. And he had something called the Camel Drivers of Outer Mongolia. And when he have get people who all of a sudden either did reprehensible driving or did surprisingly well, had to get up in front of the entire award ceremony and sing some rather off-color lyrics to the Camel Driver's Lament. And that was Al Capel. I mean, they were having fun. They were having fun all the way through it. And those days sort of ended by the time I stopped racing.
So our speaker today is Bob Devlin at the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon live from St. Francis Yacht Club, where the view out the window could not be prettier. He's a historian. He's written books on auto racing, and he's a sailor, of all things. We have another question from the audience. Mark Lambros.
Yes, you alluded, Bob, earlier and during the Golden Gate racing that brakes could maybe only last 3 laps, and they were doing 33. Or so, and I don't think they're doing pit stops and brake jobs on the. So, what was the strategy to get a car around the circuit before the brakes failed on you?
Well, I think that most of our races were sprint races, 100 miles. You had to decide how much fuel you're going to put in the car, and you got to think that you're going to be full throttle most of the time. So, if you thought you got 20 miles a gallon, you better figure on 12 in a race circuit. So, you got to figure at 12. Goes into 100 how many times? 8, 9, 10. Don't drop below about 14 gallons just to give a little reserve. Nothing worse than running out of gas while you're in a race and in contention. It's like in the old days of film, before all this new film technology came along. You never ran out of film. The one thing you didn't do. So I always had extra film with me when I was shooting. I did a lot of shooting back those days. Mainly with a Nikon, but I also had a Rolleiflex for more salon-type photo. But I made more friends by having Pro, you know what Pro film is? It has to be refrigerated. Pro 25 for red cars. A lot of different, the pastel colors. You went for the Japanese Fuji film. It always picked up, right? But I always said, hey, here's 30 more exposures. Yeah. Well, can I pay you for it? No. Sometime I'll be in your country and I'll run out of film. You can pay me back with film. So that's how it always did. You did that. You leveled the load with other people because you'd been there. You'd run out of film before. It's a rule, a cardinal rule. You don't ever run out of film.
That's a gracious note for us to end. Thank you for attending the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon live from St. Francis Yacht Club. And with that, the luncheon is adjourned.